We are recording that. I have 12:30. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Please bear with your old professor here in that this gives me an opportunity to reminisce. I'm looking at people that I remember having been in the classroom where you are sitting today. And it's just great to see them again. And they are members, I think all three of them proud members of our Alumni Advisory Board, which we have in the History Department. And without further ado, because you're here to hear them today, I will introduce them to you and then ask my one question that I already prepped you on, and then turn things over to you as the class with your questions. So really, we're honored and privileged today to have Michelle Fullenkamp, Jeff Jolliffe, and Allison Turville join us. And let me introduce you to each of them. Michelle Fullenkamp is currently a program director and academic advisor at Miami of Ohio's Honors College. She has used her Ball State bachelor's degree in public history and Spanish. She was a dual major. Her MA in history and museum studies from the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and her MA in curriculum and instruction from Montana State University to live a number of interesting journeys in her life, quite honestly. She lived for years in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where she worked at both the National Museum of Wildlife Art and the Jackson Hole Children's Museum. She also taught as a Spanish dual immersion history teacher at the Jackson Hole Middle School and saw the famous Grizzly 399. I have to mention that for those of you who know something about Grizzly 399. With internships at the Smithsonian Institution and the Baltimore Museum of Art, she has spent some significant time out west and on the East Coast, and has now returned home to hilly southwestern Ohio, which is a very pretty place, actually. Once upon a time, she was an undergraduate teaching fellow in Kayla Combs's role here in the classroom for my class, and she joins Jeff Jolliffe and Allison Turville for the first time in an Alumni Advisory Board event. Jeff Jolliffe, oh gosh, Jeff, one of my first students here. Jeff Jolliffe is a senior property adjuster for the California State Automobile Association, CSAA AAA. Before that, he worked for Engel Martin and served for nearly 3 years as a property claims supervisor at California Fair Plan Association in the same role, and also in the same role at Mercury Insurance for 5 years. Jeff holds a bachelor's degree in history from Ball State and is a truly dedicated member of the department's Alumni Advisory Board. His special interest as an undergraduate was Latin America, and he studied at the University of New Mexico for a semester to take more classes related to his focus. In California, Jeff helps people deal with the material losses experienced on the front lines of global warming, where climate change contributes to increasing numbers of forest fires, and when there is too much precipitation, mudslides that can destroy homes. As a member of our Alumni Advisory Board, he has presented to our college's dean with Allison Turville, and I have been told the review was excellent, by the way. She enjoyed your team effort there. And so without further ado now, Allison. Allison Turville is Director of Digital Media for Vail Group and Allen Family Philanthropies. Allison has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in history from Ball State University, with a focus on the history of Mexico. This interest led her to travel in Mexico and study with prominent historian William Beasley. Her vision has always been both global and local. And today in Seattle, she has, among other things, promoted rock concerts in the Pacific Northwest. She has helped to combat organized crime's involvement in elephant poaching by being involved in deploying drones, sensors, and other technology to help East African rangers to track herds and find poachers. She also was involved in providing grant money to apply AI to detecting the signature sounds that African elephants use to identify each other. One LinkedIn user described her, I've got to do this again, I know I've done this once before. One LinkedIn user described her as a gifted writer, an incisive strategist, and a complete laugh riot. which is sort of how I remember you in class too. Allison is another truly dedicated member of our Alumni Advisory Board, and today she once again teams up with Jeff, and they meet Michelle, and I do have a question for them, and then it's all you. The question, as you know, in advance, and we can go maybe alphabetical order again. We'll just go Fullenkamp, Jolliffe, Torville. The question is, what did you pick up in your history classes in terms of skills or a skill set, a toolkit that has helped you with your life experiences, which are varied and not always directly related to history? So that's your question. You can each take it on, you can talk to each other, and then, at about 1 o'clock or thereabouts, we'll turn things over. At 1:05, we'll turn things over to the class. It's all yours. Michelle?
Well, hello. It's nice to meet you all virtually. Um, as Dr. Alves said, I work at Miami University now, and I'm an academic advisor. Um, and previously, I've worked a lot. I would describe it as working with informal education and then formal education in schools. So sometimes, like when I've been teaching, I taught 7th grade history. It was pretty clear cut in terms of that I'm teaching history and I'm teaching the skills that I learned as a student. But I think that the other things to keep in mind is that it has sometimes been challenging in the sense of teaching to different age groups, sometimes to very young children, trying to break history down. For them, how do I make history interesting to students who are learning it in Spanish, maybe not their first language, and that has been its own task in itself. And so I think that as someone who's come from a museum background, I've always moved from using evidence and artifacts and helping students or individuals see how they can use their own minds to actually make connections and make deductions to analyze. And so that's been a big part of what I've done. But I think that as a historian, I have also been someone who traditionally has been trained to look for patterns. And so I've looked for patterns in my students' behavior. So maybe not just how they're learning, but I've looked for, what sorts of patterns am I seeing in their behavior in class that's indicative of maybe a problem outside of class, or a certain way that they learn, or how can I best meet their needs based on these kind of repetitive behaviors that I see in class. But I think it also goes into student learning, looking at patterns and how students learn and how we can best approach that, using evidence in that context of, and I think historians are curious and creative and good at looking for where can we find resources? And so I think that's been extremely helpful in the course of my career. Um, and I think sometimes it's funny things that you wouldn't think of. Like I spent some time managing other individuals and internships or as volunteers. And something I've realized is that when people don't know the history, they have no context of whether something is better or worse. And so in managing people, I've realized that it's important to give them context and history, so that they have a sense of where things were before in an organization and where things are moving. I think that's really important. Um, so in some of the ways that I now use history, I work with students in the Honors College at Miami University. I mainly am in charge as not just in advising them, but in managing students who are doing their honor senior project. And so having done a thesis myself, both at Ball State, actually with Dr. Alves, I wrote my honors thesis and history with Dr. Alves at Ball State, and then having had a more creative master's thesis that's helped me in addressing some of the research concerns that I've come up with up against and explaining with students. So sometimes, again, that very direct application But I will also share with you that Dr. Alves and I were talking a little bit. I've had a varied career, and so in some cases, it's when you're applying for jobs, it's how do you use the evidence of the work that you've done to apply for something that maybe isn't quite like connect the dots for someone on paper. And so, for instance, I was previously teacher, a museum educator, and now I'm working as an academic advisor with college students. And that was something I had to make a case for. And so for me, what I did was I looked at the job description and I saw that they were, it was partially dealing with students who are having internships in their honor senior project. And I talked a lot about how I had dealt with interns and set interns up for success and learning in my career and applied that to their needs and made the argument for that. And I think that's largely why I got the job. So I think that it part of this experience of learning how to use evidence and being creative about it is using that evidence when you're applying for a job. When I think about the job market and I think about how you go about if you're interested in something that maybe isn't a direct application to, say, history, I really recommend using that knowledge of research by going in and looking at places where you think you might want to work. So for instance, I might look for at a museum and see what different positions people are filled, if they're a specific position that's most interesting to me, and then say go the beauty of online pieces is you can go on LinkedIn and kind of get a sense of what that person has done leading up to that job, what their education background has been, what sorts of things are they focusing on, and doing that for many, many, many different organizations and kind of looking for patterns. What have people done in the past? And sometimes you will find, and very often you will find that people don't have always education that lines up directly with their job, but they've either had connections or made the case that they have the skills to do that job. And so I think being a historian is really sets you up to have success in that. Um, so the other thing I think of being a historian, trained as a historian, is that I found I really value talking to my elders. I value listening to making friends with people who aren't my same age in the community and hearing how they have gone about and tackled life. Um, I think now you're at you know this, but sometimes I wish that I had taken more advantage of talking to faculty and staff because they are there to be your mentors. And I think especially at Ball State that they are eager and excited to help you. Um, and then um, another piece that I wanted to mention in the job search, when you go out on the job search, sometimes it can be tough. And so I recommend finding sometimes I actually refer to, this sounds silly, but sports figures. I like to watch tennis. And so sometimes I find tennis players, they have a very high probability of losing and losing early. And so they have to really kind of build themselves up and keep pushing. And so I find for me, I know I find that that's helpful to hear some of their strategy because the job search can be daunting at times. Maybe it's not, but you have to be persistent. And then there's something else I wanted to mention and share, just as I am working with students your own age now and in my own, again, search is someone named Adam Grant. And maybe you have heard of his book, but he wrote a book named Power Moves and also Think Again. And I think that those are really, he also has a podcast called Work Life. Um, he's a professor in his own right, and he um, interviews people in these and gives you suggestions for things like how do you ask for more money when you're applying for a job. And he gives you some examples, especially in Think Again, of what is good culture, what does good work culture look like? What does it look like to work for a company or an organization that's really interested in growth and excellence and also supportive of you in the process? And I think those are things that you want to be conscious of as you're moving forward. So I think with that, I will pass it on to Jeff.
Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon, everybody. As Dr. Alves said, I'm Jeff Jolliffe. I've been in the insurance homeowners property claims for about 23 years now. Not the traditional career path of a history major. However, you know, to directly answer the question posed to us is the first thing that I use as somebody trained in history would be analysis. You're taking right now, you might look at a painting or read a journal entry from a first person account, and you're looking at that, you're looking at what was said, what was depicted, what wasn't depicted, what wasn't said. And you're thinking about the point of view of that person and what was the point of making that work, and what is the point of that primary source. So as a claims adjuster, you're looking at, okay, here's this report from this vendor, here's this description of damage from the insured, thinking about where they are coming from, what is in the report, what isn't in the report, what else do you need to be able to really dig into that evidence and find out, and to create that picture of what you're seeing. But not only in a strict investigation kind of sense, but also in, as a supervisor, we had some negative trends and some customer satisfaction surveys with our team. And I was literally sitting in a meeting and they were talking about, well, we could do this and that'll fix it. We can do that and that'll fix it. And I said, hey, wait a minute, guys. We don't even know what's driving this. We haven't looked at the cause. So when you're thinking about cause and effect, when you're thinking about analyzing, primary sources, that's a big piece of what I do on a daily basis. And it brings something extra and it brings something better, I think, to the equation when you're talking about being in a business environment and being able to apply things that you wouldn't think would be important, but they are essential, and it makes you better and it makes the team better. The second thing that I think of is communication. How can you express your ideas in writing and verbally? When you're standing in somebody's home and you're explaining the claims process that you've explained a million times, you have to be a good listener, and that's a big part of it. You have to understand what they're looking for, what's important to them, and adapt your communication style to that. Not only the style, but the content. If you're in a widow's home and she's upset, and even if the damage is small, you have to be able to show compassion. You have to talk about, listen, this is a process and this is how it's going to work. And you might have to repeat something 3 or 4 times. As opposed to if you're in the home of a high-powered attorney and he's really irritated that he's even having to come here and deal with this today. You're going to get to the point. You're going to be the Hemingway of claims adjusters, and you're going to get to the point. You're not going to waste a word. So it's about adaptability. It's about communication, whether you're notating a file, whether you're writing a report. Those things are essential. And I know that's something that is serving you well right now, writing a paper or putting an answer in a modified true false quiz. Being able to express what you're looking for. Lastly, what I think about is, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is that compassion piece. I really foresee a day where machines will be doing a lot of the things that we as claims adjusters do. They can measure a roof already. they have machines that you can set up at a house and it will videotape the entire house and do a diagram for the entire house and document all the damages. So that day is coming where things like that will take the place of a lot of what we're doing today. What they won't take the place of is sitting down at somebody's kitchen table, listening to what their concerns are and saying, hey, listen, this is a reality for you right now, and I'm sorry about that, but this will be a memory soon. And I'm here to help you get to that point where it's a memory and not a reality. And that's huge. And, that's what insurance companies are selling. When you see an ad for an insurance policy, they're not talking about, we've got the best spreadsheets and we've got the best numbers here and we've got the lowest cost to adjust a claim. They're talking about peace of mind. They're talking about that compassion. We're going to take care of you. And that's really at the heart of when you sell an insurance policy, what you're doing. You're exchanging risk. They're accepting that risk, that you don't have to worry about it. So that piece of it, because you don't study history and you don't study people's lives that came before us, for some kind of spreadsheet or some kind of number, you're interested in their lives. You're fascinated by what came before, what motivated people. And so that takes a special kind of, person, that takes a special kind of, element in your character that really is the future, I think, of this particular industry and what I do. And then, lastly, as far as, that kind of future sense and where things are going and what you can do, don't limit yourself. There's lots of great opportunities out there. Insurance was not in my head when I was at Ball State studying history, but it is an option for you that is largely recession proof, pays well, can be challenging at times, but when you get up in the morning and turn on that computer, it is not, it can be some same old, but there's always something new. And so that the options really for you are kind of wide open. And I think Dr. Alves invites me on here because I am a great example of that, and I think I am. And what on those days when I am drowning in spreadsheets and I'm looking at numbers and dollar signs and complaint calls, the things, the elements, the ideas, the skills that I learned in classes like this give me that purpose-driven life. And it gives me the fuel for what I do and the kind of person and the kind of work that I do. So that's to answer that question. And now, if you're tired of listening to me, here's Allison.
Here we go. Yeah, so Allison Torville, I got my undergrad and master's at Ball State, both in history. I had a focus in Mexican history, as Dr. Alves said. To build on a lot of what Michelle and Jeff already said, the number one thing that I bring to my career in communications is reading, research, analysis, writing. There's lots of different verticals within communications, marketing, PR, corporate communications, or internal, but ultimately a lot of your job in comms is going to be gathering information, aggregating it, analyzing it, and then delivering it to someone else, usually to prove you did a good job. And that's, I think, for most kind of corporate careers, the amount of email and communication back and forth and writing that you have to do is insane. And, history majors are trained to be some of the best writers in the room, or all humanities, really. If you're studying humanities, you're going to be a better writer than, no shade to business majors, but you're going to be a better writer than a business major, sorry. And I just think that when I was in undergrad, I kind of was living with a lot of folks whose degree title was going to be their job. So they were, you know, business majors because they wanted to go into business. They were nursing majors and they became nurses. And I studied history because I was like, I'm here for 4 years and I find this topic and this style of learning very interesting. And I find this style of learning incredibly boring. And I feel like I can turn this into something. So, you know, I studied what interested me. I think some people thought I was a little bit crazy for doing it. There was definitely a period of time when I was getting my master's where I was like, I'm going to be the best educated bartender out there. But eventually, you know, I kind of started doing what I should have done in undergrad, and what you should start doing now, which was really looking at the job market and the career path that I wanted to go on, and then continue studying history because that's what I liked and that's what I enjoyed. But add on some extra skills that improved my hireability in that job market. There's, I don't know why this happens in college. I don't know what's going on in high school now, but there's no like, you start so late thinking about your career and about the job market and about your resume and about applying and what you want to do. You start when you're thinking about it when you're like a junior or senior. That's too late. Like it will come at you so fast. And so what you need to do now, study history, study philosophy, study archaeology, study a humanities that you care about and are interesting because you're spending the money, like it's your money, study what is interesting to you, but spend that time also multitasking for your future and creating artifacts that will make your resume interesting. And there's a way you can do that, and you're going to learn the same skill studying history, which is, like Michelle said, like start researching now. Um, Start researching either a company that you're really interested in or a type of field or a career track that you think, you know, is recession proof and employable. Communications, the history to communications pipeline is like very smooth. Especially if you start now getting those extra knowledge points, those extra things. So if you're like, I think I want to do communications because I'm a good writer, I'm a good researcher. So you go and here, I'm actually going to show you. Sorry, my Spotify's up. So here's a job posting. It's closed now, but a communications associate. This is an entry-level comms role. This is at Pew Research Center, which is in DC. It puts out really good, interesting, super well-analyzed, nonpartisan research on all sorts of topics. But if you look at the skills and the knowledge, this is what history majors learn. Like all of this is what you're learning in history. So sure, your degree doesn't say communications, but any hiring manager with half a brain, and as long as you justify it in your resume appropriately, like this is a very employable entry-level role for anyone who has a degree in history. Never ever pay attention to this line. I don't know why they put years of experience on here. Ignore it. This is an entry-level role that you could come out of college and get, especially if you spent time over your 4 years also doing other things, learning a tool like MailChimp, learning social media. That was my pipeline. I got into comms through social media during like the nascent days of social media before it really even became a thing. But this is what you should be doing now. You should be looking at roles, writing down all of the requirements, make a spreadsheet, write it down. The job title is communications, and then write down all the skills and the tool skills. Okay, this thing needs MailChimp, so maybe I should learn what MailChimp is, or another email marketing tool. This thing it's a podcast role, so I need to learn Adobe Suite. Like you can learn those things with the YouTube channel. Sure, you can go take a class. There's definitely minors that have like how to do podcast editing or how to do SEO, search engine optimization, all that stuff. You can definitely do that, but these are self-taught skills as well. You can train yourself on how Google Analytics works. This is all stuff that I wandered into with a couple history degrees and a working knowledge of social media. And this same thing, that hasn't changed. As long as you spend 4 years creating proof points and artifacts that you do know how to use these things. Otherwise, it's just lying. So like start a MailChimp for a class and have all your classmates sign up and then send out a recap of what happened in class that people can sign up for in case they miss something like that. Create a TikTok channel where you review the beards of 19th century presidents or whatever. Like, yes, it's dumb. No, it's not an assignment. Like, no one cares about your homework when you're applying for these jobs. They don't want to see your thesis. Sorry. I wish they did. I love telling people about it unprovoked, but they don't care. They want to see artifacts of the skill sets that they're looking for. So with communications, which especially within the social media pipeline, do things, even if they're not assigned to you, that creates an artifact that you then put on your resume. Started a newsletter for my History 400 course, recapping the classes, and earned 120 signups. That's a data point that proves you know how to use a tool. This is what you should be thinking about, is looking at these roles and then being like, how do I learn these skills on top of studying history? Do both of those things. You can do them side by side. There's plenty of hours in a day for both of these things, and to have fun, because I had a lot of fun at Ball State. I haunted the village, but you can take initiative now that's going to set you up for success, so you're not facing a total panic meltdown your senior year when you realize, when you look at these jobs and you're like, I don't know what any of these things are. I can't tell them that I know this because I haven't looked into it yet. So I'm just trying to set you up now to realize that, like, you have 4 years to study history, to learn something you care about, to become a really, really good researcher and writer and analyst. But you should learn other stuff too. You should learn specifically the stuff that is showing up in job descriptions of roles that you find interesting. And then finally, I'm going to show you one more thing. So here's how I would use ChatGPT. Early career communications jobs at research institutes and museums. Every single one of you, if you get a bachelor's degree in history, will qualify for this role, especially if you look into some of the other skill sets they're looking for. See what they have. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Here's 7 right now that are at museums or research institutes or academic institutes, where you can go in, you'll write social media posts, you'll write email newsletters, you'll analyze audience growth, you'll do the exact same skills that you do when you're researching your paper on Miguel Hidalgo and the Mexican Revolution. There's definitely so much correlation, but where the disconnect happens is when you're like, my proof point is that I wrote this thesis. Because that's where the Whitney Museum is like, well, that's really cool, but like, how have you managed a social media channel? And, you know, if you thought of that freshman year, got an internship in the history department, the English department, there's, you know, every department has a social media channel at a university, I feel like. Then you have that internship to give you those data points that then show up in your resume when you say, manage the history department social media channel, grew audiences by 32%. Added a TikTok channel for graduate assistants to recap their study sessions. There's a lot of like initiative and creativity that needs to go into what you're going to do between now and graduation. And you can do that while also studying something that you don't find boring, because that's the thing I dreaded most when I was in school, was classes that I found really boring. Turns out it's good I had ADHD. Didn't know that at the time. So that's my kind of stark, maybe slightly depressing advice for what's coming, is start thinking about it now, start doing the research now. And then my final kind of depressing, but hopefully helpful advice is that your first job out of college is not going to be your favorite job. It'll probably end up being your least favorite job, but it'll be the job that gets you to your favorite job. And with that,
I'll get on camera because I guess we're turning it over to the class at this point. Thank you. I expected these great things from all of you and I got them. So I think it worked out seamlessly, and it was great to hear how you fed off each other in terms of your information. I could keep talking to my former students and friends here, but you're here to ask questions of them and to try to learn from their life experiences, because it is never too early. So without further ado, are there any questions from the floor? Introduce yourselves, first of all, when you ask the question, raise your hand. Do I see any hands? Oh, okay, I see one over there, Lizette. I know your name, but you didn't.
Do I introduce myself?
Yes, yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Lizette. I wanted to ask, especially since Jeff mentioned that, you know, you started like with history and then you ended up in like insurance claims. But this question is kind of for everyone. When did you realize what you wanted to do? And when you started working after graduation, did that like change your dreams or your plans a little bit?
Well, sure. Um, you know, and Allison is exactly right in that was a good example of not really thinking about what I was going to do until I was done. And a little bit of a scramble. And to be honest, I got into insurance claims because they were hiring. I needed to get a job. And so I got in that door, found out what it was like. Um, and, you know, like I said, this was not a goal of mine to get into this career. And my appreciation of it developed over time. And what I brought to it, and looking at that instead of like the day in, day out part was something that I had to develop over time. But I'm at a place now where it's very rewarding. And had I had that perspective going in, it probably would have even been, you know, better for some of those lean years. Because Allison also said something very true in that the first job you get is going to be, you know, kind of a slog. But um, there are opportunities there. There are branches you can go from getting in the door at insurance to things like special investigation units. You can get into management, you can get into communications, and there's all kinds of branches you can go through when you go through that door.
Yeah.
Anyone else up there or?
Yeah, I mean, I had planned on going through to my doctorate. A variety of stuff was going on while I was getting my master's. And I think the final straw was like, I was sick of being poor. And that kind of was the impetus for me to be like, okay, I don't want to continue on with my doctorate. I'd really like to have health insurance. I'm going to look at what am I good at? And I was like, oh, I'm really good at writing because I've been doing it for like 1 billion years now. And I went into grant writing first through an organization that I was familiar with because I worked at one while I was getting my master's at the Boys and Girls Club, and I got into research or resource development there, writing grants because I'm a good writer. So I just was like, I could do this for you guys. And then through AmeriCorps, which I believe still exists, they paid for my relocation to Washington State from Indiana and placed me in a grant writing at a Boys and Girls Club there. From there, I turned that into a full-time role. There's some reasons that worked for me. I was with someone, or we're married now, but at the time was with someone who had a big kid job and, you know, with a salary and a 401k and stuff. So we were able to share the cost of living. But you know, each job I got turned into a better job because I had kind of an outcome I wanted financially. And then that's the path that I took. And that sounds very unromantic, but like that's what it turns into quickly is you're no longer looking for the romantic job of that you imagine yourself in when you were 18. And instead you're like, how are the bennies? What's the pay like? What's the location where this job is? Is this where I want to live? And there's a very practical mindset that comes in because you can still do other things that you like and you find really that make you feel really fulfilled outside of your job. Like I'm really into 1990s video games. And as a side thing, I write articles for these websites don't exist anymore because digital media collapsed, but I write articles about 1990s video games that I would research and write about. And it was fun and it didn't really pay anything, and that was okay because I had my job that paid me things, and I got to do something that I cared about and thought was interesting. So I've kind of continued that path as an adult. But I think like you really just need to think about what you want from your postgraduate life, and then look at the things you need to get there, and then slowly build those stepping stones up.
Mhm. Similar to Alice and Jeff, I think you know, the realities of life come out eventually. But when I really realized what I wanted to do, I was actually interning at the what's now the David Owsley Museum of Art, and I was a docent there, and I thought that that was the coolest way to learn. And so that's why I pursued a master's in history and museum studies. And when I was graduating, I decided that I would look for paid internships as well as jobs, because I was like, I need something, and I need something in my field. And so I ended up at the National Museum of Wildlife Art, which happens to be in Jackson, Wyoming, and spent a summer there. Kind of got to extend my time, and then had been applying to jobs all summer and didn't find anything. Which in retrospect probably isn't that surprising because museum education jobs are very competitive. But I ended up at the Jackson Hole Children's Museum, which wasn't really my ideal situation. It does, you know, children's museums don't have collections, but what I found is that I really learned a lot as an educator, and I was doing things like, it was a very small museum. I was cleaning bathrooms, I was cleaning up after children. It was, as they said, it was not what I thought that I was going to be doing with my master's degree. But again, in retrospect, um, I learned so much about being a more engaging teacher, hands-on, and not that I hadn't in other museum jobs, but just so much more in working with younger kids. And I think for me, I have worked with almost every age level at this point, and that has been that's been really interesting for me, engaging and learning how to teach all those different age levels. And then there came a point where I was looking for more growth, and I ended up actually working at an art association, which was awesome because I got to work with artists and learn how they think and bring more creativity to learning. But working for nonprofits in this small town was, I didn't have benefits. I didn't have retirement, and I was wanting to grow, and so I was like, how I want to grow as a teacher. And that's when I went back to school and got my master's in curriculum and instruction so I could teach. And that's because having a teaching job in our community was the solid next step. And so from a practical standpoint, there is a very like life reason that happened, where it wasn't just like, I want to grow as a teacher. It was also like, I need benefits and a job that pays me enough to live.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I think, and then things changed, and then COVID happened, and our community, I know that people say that housing is expensive everywhere, and in our particular community, it was just astronomical. And so it was time to come home, and lots of reasons why it was time to come home. I wasn't in my 20s and needed to be closer to family. You know, like life changes, and I think that's something that you have to like. I actually, you have to just remember that you can't completely control it. Like you kind of have to take things as they come. Like somebody in your family gets sick, or your partner gets sick, or your kids get sick. Like things can happen, and it will impact also your, not just like, do I want benefits in this job and is it paying better, but also sometimes those sorts of life things crop up that you have to take into account, and just shift and change. And I think Jeff has said he actively sought out ways to make his job interesting. Allison has talked about how she did that, and I think that in every job I've had as well, it's this active push to where am I finding the satisfaction? What is the piece of it that gives me peace at the end of the day and makes me feel like and then just sometimes you just really have to like it might be small. Like when I was working at the Children's Museum, um, as I mentioned, there were a lot of menial parts of that, but I was constantly either they were one of the funny things was that I ended up talking to parents a lot because parents of young children are very isolated and they need contact with other adults. And so it was like kind of like, how can I learn from that? And what can I like take even just taking that away? Or sometimes it would be in school, like you'd have behavior problems all day. And then it would just be something small that a student would say to you that you take home in your pocket and you try to pull that out at the end of the day to like kind of sustain yourself, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's always a mix of life is a mix of what do you want to do and how can you make the best of this?
Yeah.
I
And
saw a hand. Sorry, go ahead, Allison.
I was just gonna say that's what made studying history for 4 years and longer for me so great is that I wasn't in things that weren't interesting to me. I found a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment from studying things that I cared about and writing about them and reading about them and rabbit holing about them. And that's the kind of approach I've taken postgraduate of where like there's a lot of unsexy things about adulthood and decisions that you have to make. And at least I could find enjoyment in other things. This is really depressing. Sorry. Uh, like I really cherished the time that I spent studying something I really cared about. And I took a lot of what I learned into how I approached roles in adulthood, which is like find the thing that you get a lot of enjoyment out of while also doing the thing that allows you to pay rent.
Okay, I saw Zach's hand. We'll go to Zach next. But one thing I'm getting out of this myself is we're all given a mess one way or another in our personal lives or the evidence thrown at jobs. We're given a mess. And where you can do things better than ChatGPT is you can organize the mess based upon actually looking at the mess using your senses. Profs are getting pretty good at reading the fluffy stuff we get in terms of generalizations from ChatGPT. These people are telling you what history gives you in terms of being writers is that you write from the evidence. You write from the mess you're given and you try to present it in a more ordered fashion. Zach?
Yes, I was wondering how you've applied your cultural studies. That includes language backgrounds, other things from college. I didn't really hear that much touched on. Like, has that been an asset to you lately?
Yeah, you all
Well,
did a lot of good stuff. Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
yeah. Yeah, so I did study Spanish in undergrad and I did a lot of service learning courses with Dr. Apak when I was there, which I thought were really interesting and it was kind of a passion area for me and when I look back, it's kind of fun to see that because of that, in every job that I took on, I tried in some way to connect with the Latino community. So, like at the Children's Museum, Jackson has a pretty large Latino community. Um, we were kind of trying to market ourselves, but also create programs like Three Kings Day, things like that, where we would try to draw in that community or Dia de los Muertos. We are, obviously trying to pull in that community. When I worked at the Art Association, I actually got to be involved in a exhibition that featured artists from Mexico. And so I was the only person on staff who spoke Spanish fluently enough to communicate with the artists, bring and deal with all the details related to that. But then also my job on the other side was that we were trying to make this it was the organization, we largely saw Latinos in our student classes, our children's classes, and so trying to bring more adults in. And so I was involved in trying to expand that community effort. And I say community because I was working with other community groups, especially ones that worked specifically with Latinos in bringing adults in. And I was really maybe one of the most rewarding projects of my career in the sense that adults really did get to come in. We did see a turnout and we did make connections. And then when I taught history, I was teaching about 3 out of 5 classes all in Spanish. And so, again, half of my students were Latinos. I was teaching Greek and Roman and medieval history, and I was like, we have to have some representation here. So I added in the Mayas and the Aztecs, and also I think so there was that piece. And so I would say, I don't know, that's very specific, but in general, I've always accepted this. My job now is there's less reason for me to bring my Spanish into it. But pretty much every job that I've had, I've been able to kind of use it and also make connections and inroads with the Latino community. Does that help?
Because, and also because a lot of what was discussed here was about how this degree and this path will funnel you into certain places. I mean, I'm really glad that you just touched on how you can actually expand and introduce opportunities to your professional environment, things that would have otherwise not been available to your organization if you weren't there, which is really valuable for you to have done.
Thank you.
I'll just add in a very, Dr. Alves will recognize this like Allison way, but cultural competency, especially in communications roles where you talk within your organization and externally, it makes you not an asshole. Being a culturally competent human being is a really important skill set when you go into a varied and diverse workforce where you really are going to need to assess and understand your internal and external audiences and the world experiences they bring. And no one knows that better than a historian. And it really teaches a level of reading the room, of empathy, of coming in and being able to make some assessments based on like your knowledge and understanding of current, past, and ever-changing cultures. Yeah, in communications, think of the companies that get dragged on a monthly basis for the dumb things that they put out into the world because no one in the room was like, wow, that's racist. Like that tells you what that room looked like, but they like couldn't, no one in the room came to that conclusion because that room was not culturally competent.
And even in my role, studying, like, for example, Latin American history, it just opens your mind to the fact that your experience is not every experience. And there's so much more out there. I had a claim with some folks, first generation Japanese Americans, and it was just a struggle. We had a vendor that really kind of screwed up, and the relationship kind of broke down. And I took the time to look up some, business practices and what what's important in that culture. And what I found worked. I used it to turn the claim around, and it was great. And yes, that's a small little thing, but I've used that story in every interview I've been on since then. So it was very valuable to me too.
Yeah, honestly, other questions? Other people? Yes, PJ.
It's not, hi, I'm PJ, nice to meet you. This is not really a question, but Miss Torville, I just want you to know, I think you're cynical as hell and I love you for it.
I'm not cynical, I'm a pragmatist, and we're in a post-capitalist hellscape, and I don't think that colleges adequately prepare students and also don't give them the empowerment to study the humanities. They don't give them the backup that humanities are important and make you culturally competent and make you the person in the room that says, whoa, don't do that, or you're going to lose all of your investors because that's a stupid decision. And so I think that studying history also made me a pragmatist because the world is full of horrific histories, and that's what you're going to read about.
And you say that with a smile on your face.
I do, because that's who I am. Yeah.
Anyway, other questions or comments? These are great, by the way, folks. Oh yeah, Kayla Combs. She is the undergraduate teaching fellow for this class.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I just want to ask, how do you balance your work life versus your personal life? Because, like, I'm a social studies education major, so I know what I'm gonna do, and that's gonna be a teacher, and I understand the pay cut that goes with that. But like, how do you keep that stress low so it doesn't affect your personal life?
I can't answer that one. I'm waiting for wisdom here, folks.
I mean, life is always going to be stressful. Find things you enjoy and do them. I mean, that's like seek joy just constantly while you do other things that you have to do to live as a human, but also just seek joy. Like right now, my work-life balance involves a 7-year-old a lot. So like lots of K-pop Demon Hunter. I don't know, they need to come out with another album because it's only 8 songs and I can't hear Gold again.
For me, it's just been, my personal life has been very rich. My family life has been extraordinarily rewarding. Um, and I kind of look at it like I've been doing a lot of poetry writing lately, and I kind of came upon this analogy, which I love analogies, as Dr. Alves will remember. And my job is like ground beef. Okay. Right.
I know
You
you
cook the ground beef and you can just eat the ground beef, right? Right out of the pan. And it would nourish you, it would give you some protein, and it would have some flavor to it. But my life outside of work is like a can of manwich. Okay. You put that on the ground beef, you make a sloppy Joe. It's something else. It elevates it, it transforms it. You can't just crank open the can of manwich and eat the manwich because that's gross. You need the ground beef and you need the manwich. And that's kind of how I look at it. It's kind of like the balance, yeah, maybe I wish I could sit around more and read and write poetry, or go on trips to Calistoga or the wine country or something like that. But you need to get the hamburger in there too, and it kind of gives you an appreciation of the work, and it kind of balances a little more of what each thing's role is in your life.
That's so beautiful.
He's an excellent poet, by the way. I can vouch for that. I've read his poetry, Oh, I see another hand. Okay, Elise.
Hi, I'm Elise. I'm a public history major, but I also have minors in digital marketing and German.
Yes.
So the main is like, oh, well, I'm either gonna end up a bartender or like running the museum's Twitter account.
Yes.
But
It's great.
love Kate Bush, we're like kind of the same person here. But one of the things that I'm like worried about as a public history major, I have to do an internship. Like, how would you go about finding an internship that fulfills that requirement, but also blending other things together? That will help
Digital,
you.
I got you. Digital or social aspect insert where you have a bunch of different digital based roles at a history or academic institute. Within, you can do it in your college, you can do it at, like, yes, do exactly that. Write tweets for a museum. That is a great resume. Like, you will get any entry-level comms role you want with the proof points that you have from that internship experience. That's like, if I was the director of digital media for Pew Research Institute, that would be like, I'm hiring an entry-level social media manager. Okay, who's done an internship at a museum before? So you're doing it right. And then bartend too, because there will always be bartenders. So you can always fall back on that.
I do.
Yeah, Michelle.
Oh, sorry, to play off of that, I will say that people who are aware of what museums involve, like that there are these bureaucratic organizations that have a lot of hierarchy and different roles. My current boss told me that he hired me because I had a museum's background. And I think because of that, so I think don't underestimate what working for a short amount of time in that role can do for you, as Allison said, and be thinking about all the other things that come up as you're working in that job that are soft skills that you want to put on your resume. And I think also, playing to your strengths, and any opening that you can find to say, hey, can I do this? Can I try this? my job at the Children's Museum was not the job that I made it. My job at the Children's Museum was supposed to be much different, but I said, hey, I can do this and I can do that. And I want to do this. And I took over managing volunteers, and I created an internship program. And because of that, I made that job much sexier than it would have been if I had just been like, okay, I'll just toe the line and do what they tell me. So don't underestimate speaking up and being like, hey, I could do that. And I think there's so much value. Like even in my job, we have a student worker who's taking care of our social media page, and we just want to kind of give it to them. We don't want to deal with that like we could, but so I think you'll find that people, if you are willing to say, hey, I think here I have this idea and I have this ability to do it, then they'll be like, yeah, let's do it.
Any new voices? Any other hands? Oh, yeah, sure, Clark.
Oh, hi, I'm Clark. I'm wanting to go more into the scholarly fields, writing sort of research papers and potentially into professorship. Does anyone have any advice for that?
So are you planning on going through a master's or a doctorate?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend, especially starting now. I don't know what year you're in, but starting now, whatever year it is, start seeking out on the job experiences in any capacity at research institutes. When you do look into the eventual job market after you complete whatever level degree you do, scientific or academic writing and white papers are a huge part of most academic institutes and research institutes for their colleges or for their, so like in Seattle, we have like Fred Hutch Cancer Institute, we have the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, for brain science. All of these kind of academic institutes are looking for content writers that have, broadly a great writing and an academic level writing skill set. So even if you didn't study like whatever you studied to study cancer research, I don't even know. Even if you didn't study that and did it in history or whatever, that, that I think that the tier of academic level writing that offers, those research institutes aren't going to be like degree specific. They just want you to have that level of ability. But I would start looking now and start getting into institutes and places at the earliest level you can.
Thanks.
It's all about collecting receipts.
That's really good advice because actual professorships are shrinking in number. So the thing is, you can still live a life as a researcher with a PhD, either being a professor in the classroom or potentially doing something like that. Like it's really fun to work with people outside of the professorship. I work with a number of scientists in this group called Session. Some of them are not professors, others are science professors. But don't silo yourself. Think history, but think a little bit more broadly too, and in terms of research along those lines as a possibility. Anything else, Jeff, Michelle? Okay, great. We're getting a number of different voices out there. Any other new voices, questions, comments? Anything? Oh yeah, sure, Jonathan.
My name is Jonathan. I've heard, listening to you guys, I've heard like at least two of you speak about like creative writing stuff, which is my personal degree. And also talk about work-life balance. Do you have any like, thoughts, recommendations, stuff about that?
What, as a creative writer, what do you want? What do you envision yourself doing one day?
Mostly screenwriting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if for the first half of the question, if you want to go into the creative writing for television, that sort of thing, there's definitely create on your own things, have artifacts that you have written and created, regardless of if they have been a produced television series. It doesn't matter. Like if you're into D&D and you're a creative writing major, and you want to go into screenwriting, if you have like a drafted D&D campaign that you put together, like I realize this sounds crazy, but that is an artifact for a portfolio one day for whatever you're trying to hustle your way into a PA role or an internship role in LA or something like that. Like you having artifacts like that are more important, I think, than like even you having like a creative writing paper from a high level English class. Proof points of creativity within the space that you're working in, I think is really important. You guys keep talk about work-life balance. Like work-life balance is what you make it. It just depends on the level that you want to input into work. That's up to you.
I think too that work-life balance has ebbs and flows, and there you will find that there are periods in your life where you need to put more time into work. It's just a matter of fact if you want to get further. And there are times when you can have a little bit more of a boundary. I think it depends on your job. I heard somebody say that they're going to be an elementary school teacher. I'll tell you that I saw elementary school teachers who would stay after school until 6 o'clock every night until they had children. Then they stopped. So it just depends. And sometimes it's like a matter of you not feeling guilty, managing your guilt, dealing with your inner guilt. And I will have weekends where I say, I am not checking work email all weekend. And I will keep myself to that. There are weekends when I have to check it, and I will reply to emails because I know I have a busy week and I have to get on top of it. It just, it's probably a bit like managing your schedule as a college student, where you decide that there's some weekends where you goof off and there's some weekends where you have to study all weekend. I don't know.
Jalen.
Yeah, my name is Jalen. I have a question. How did you use AmeriCorps with navigating your field?
This was a really long time ago. Sorry. So what I remember, there's several different types of AmeriCorps. There's AmeriCorps, which will place you more in like a corporate setting, usually at a nonprofit. And then there's AmeriCorps, I can't remember what it's called, where you are kind of more in the field at like state parks and stuff. Again, please understand that this is in the like 2010. So I'm sure it has changed dramatically since then. And also that is a really alarming thing for me to say out loud. I applied to a variety of roles through the AmeriCorps government website. Government applications are incredibly bureaucratic and annoying. It'll probably take you a few tries to like realize all the stuff you need to gather for it. It's like a job in itself, applying for jobs, especially government, state or federal government jobs. And I imagine it's even harder now. But so what I did was I applied, I got my placement at Boys and Girls Club of Bellevue, which is a suburb of Seattle. They paid for my relocation, and I did an orientation in Central Washington. And then that you basically are an intern essentially, and you get paid like nothing. I think at this time I got a stipend of $900 a month, which is not a living wage in Seattle, Washington, even in 2010. I supplemented it because I lived with someone who made more money than me, but the other people that I was in AmeriCorps in that cohort with, it was kind of very much a college experience where they lived in a house together and that sort of thing. But so I got that placement there for the year. And so the year you get the stipend, and then you get the tuition reimbursement. So at the end, you get you have no interest payments on your tuition or on your student loans while you're there. And then at the end, you got a $5,000 stipend that you could use to pay into your student loans. And then after my year of service, as they called it, at this Boys and Girls Club was up, they offered me a full-time position doing the exact same thing I'd done for the past year. And so I did that for a couple of years and then started looking for what I could turn that job experience into at a new place. But AmeriCorps was at the time, again, please check and see what it's doing now. At the time, it was really great because we wanted to leave Indiana, and that was the best way for me to do that. But yeah. It's a long time ago.
I think one thing that's come across from all of you is your level of empathy. And I know that Dr. Stewart and other people teaching the social studies classes here really emphasize historical empathy. You know, there's one thing that still puts us over and above the machines, and it's that. And it's the extent to which you can communicate with other humans. And that is something that the humanities is all about. So I think you've all been saying that on one level or another. Other question, oh, yes, okay, wait a minute, Michaela.
So I have a question specifically for Michelle. I'm a social studies ed major, but I want to teach in Spain. And I'm like fluent in Spanish, but it's not my native language. So how did you go about teaching social studies in Spanish, as I assume it's also not your native language?
Yeah. Well, I had a curriculum that was in Spanish, and so that helped a lot. I like to tell people will say to me, "Are you fluent?" I say, "Yes," in Greek and Roman history. And you know, you have to put in the time to kind of like learn the names and everything in that language. And I think there was a certain amount of, I did some things like downloaded some books on Kindle that were like Spanish language, actually, I think Spanish from Spain, documents on like classroom management. I think I would recommend trying to study abroad and having some sort of introduction to Spanish schools. From what I understand, the culture around classroom management and the culture around teaching is very different there. I know very little, but we did have a few teachers come over from Spain for 1 year to teach in our dual immersion program. And there was a lot of talk around that. So that might be something to consider. Have you studied abroad in Spain?
Studied abroad in Spain for like 6 weeks.
For 6 weeks?
And I'm planning to do my student teaching abroad.
Oh, good. Well, that will really help you. But I think I listen to audiobooks on tape in Spanish. Sometimes I'll listen to ones like I read the Harry Potter books when I was younger, like multiple times. And so I would listen to those in Spanish because I knew it was happening and then I could recognize the words that I didn't know. So things like that, but also challenging yourself with watching news. I use Instagram actually to help me with my Spanish because I can follow like some news sources. I can follow people, so I can hear it from different perspectives, different kind of vocabulary sets, if that makes sense. There are a few, maybe I'll send Dr. Alves an email and share a few that are kind of more specifically history that I found interesting, but I think that's a nice way to add it into your like daily routine. Funny story, after I finished teaching, I realized I had to take a break from Spanish because I was thinking in English and Spanish so much that I was worried that in an interview, I wouldn't be able to speak well enough in English. So I have, there are these pieces that you don't think of that happen, but I think bilingualism is very fluid and sometimes I think it's helpful. I heard an actor once who he grew up in France and then moved to England, and he was talking about like this piece, and it's he was talking about how there's this sense of you don't feel funny in the other language and all these pieces of identity related to it. And so I think that there's also this piece of needing to give yourself grace and know that sometimes Spanglish is okay, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's almost 1:45, so I just want to say, my gosh, you three worked really well together, quite honestly. I think the old, at some point in the future, the old Allison and Jeff show may become the Allison, Jeff and Michelle show. I see this as a possibility down the line. So thank you so much. You know, it's so much of a pleasure to see you all again, and let's have a round of applause for these former Enjoy your days, folks. I know it's a little earlier for you on the West Coast, but you're on the same time we are, Michelle. So have a good rest of the day, all of you. Thank you so much. And do send that email along, Michelle, or anything
Okay,
else.
yeah.
Keep sending me poetry and all, and Kate Bush on your back wall, okay?
Thanks, Dr. Al.
Thanks.
Bye, Dr.